We will move into Staar Alt training. Okay, so our theme for this PowerPoint is football. So this was just a quick question to get your brain moving is how many days from when they broke ground until AT&T Stadium was opened? So think about that for just about 15 seconds and put your answer in the chat. 1,000 days, 1,692 days, 1,345, or 1,458. What do you think? About 5 more seconds. Okay, Debbie. Our answer is C, 1,345 days, and it cost $1.3 billion. Very expensive for football. Okay, so just as a reminder, this is being recorded. Please keep your microphones muted. All questions need to go in the chat, and please keep your camera active and stay engaged. And your training materials will be posted in the learning pathways. So this is our Staar Alt 2 training. There are new training modules, and they were posted in January. The link is active on the PowerPoint, and these are supplemental Staar Alternate 2 training modules. There's also a companion document that is available to review the participation requirements for Staar Alt. Training does not take the place of reading the appropriate manuals, and the test administrator manual for Staar Alt is only available online. Staar Alt 2 is a standardized assessment based administered individually for students for grades 3 through 8 and EOC subjects. Your master roster does include all this information. The key dates to remember for Staar Alt is March 12th is the deadline for the test administrator training. March 15th through 26th is the preview window. March 29th through May 7th is the Fort Worth assessment window. And April 3rd through May 4th is the check-in. There is a process. You are to submit student registrations, which has already been done, review your materials list, order any additional materials as necessary, submit student data for late registrations, administer Staar to assessment, enter student responses, verify info, and return your materials. The eligibility, there is participation requirements that the students do have to meet in order to take the Staar Alt 2 test, and this does need to be completed during their ARD meeting and be in part of their IEP. And the CTC also needs a copy. This part is for high school only. In order for them to take the specific Staar Alternate 2 test, they do need to be enrolled in the correct course code numbers. Students who enroll on or after March 29th from another school within the district. The students who move to another campus within their district after the first day of Staar 2 testing will still need to be tested. The receiving campus should contact the sending campus to determine what tests are still needed. Students who enroll on or after March 29th from another district, the receiving campus must place the student in the appropriate test sessions, mark the test complete, and assign an O score code to the test, and complete an O code documentation sheet. Your test administrators have to be certified, trained, the teacher of record, familiar with the student, and familiar with the accommodations needed. Your CTC responsibility, you are to verify the accuracy and completeness of the demographic information, ensure that all students taking the Staar Alt 2 have been included in TAMs, and train your test administrators in security and the Staar Alt 2 procedures. Also, you are to, if it is your choice, to assign the transcribe assistant user role to those who enter the student responses. If that's up to you, if you want the CTC to enter those or the teacher of record who's given the test. You are to obtain oaths, ensure proper testing environment and procedures, and answer any questions and resolve any problems. So your training, test administrators must be trained on test security for Staar Alt 2 prior to assessing secure test materials, and CTCs should use the test administrator manual during the training. Please make sure they sign a training attendance log, and you do have to have one for each training that you do give. Test security, the test administration materials are considered secure, is the teacher test booklet, the student booklets, the image cards, and copies from the student's booklets. This also involves accounting for all secure materials and confidential student information before, during, and after the test. Test materials must be kept in locked, secure storage throughout the day when not in use. Test materials, which include the photocopied pages from the student test booklet, must be returned to the CTC at the end of each day and be checked in and out using materials control form. And only individuals who are employed by the district, trained, and have the signed appropriate oath can access to the test materials. All testing personnel who participate in statewide testing must undergo training and sign the appropriate oath and they must understand their obligations concerning security and confidentiality before handling any secure test materials. Confidentiality requirements. Test administrators for Staar Alt 2 must be aware that they are viewing secure content and that discussing the content is strictly prohibited. No person may discuss student responses or Staar Alternate 2 scoring information during or after a test administration. And any presentation of materials or introduction of concepts or topics to a student prior to the administration of the test is considered a serious irregularity and should be reported as such. So for materials, there is the Staar Alternate 2 test booklet will only contain secure test materials. The test kit contains the teacher test booklet, which has a new name, the student booklet, the image cards, and the booklets do have new covers. The booklet images will be in full color except for historical photos and any images where color is found to be distracting. The Staar Alternate 2 must be administered with the student test booklet. Image cards are optional. A test administrator may use clean image cards for multiple students if there is no appearance of reuse whatsoever, such as accommodations have been applied, and clean image cards may be used for pairing with text and presenting answer choices one at a time. The image card set, the test administrator should utilize the cards in the same way that previously accommodated the student booklet page. Examples of accommodations that image cards may replace is photocopying and then cutting apart answer choices in order to present answer choices one at a time, photocopying and then cutting out an image to pair with the text, or other accommodations that require photocopying and then making a card to assist with test administration. Image cards are perforated. There are 4 cards to a standard size page. They contain the same images that appear in the test booklet. The photocopying policy has not changed. Test administrators are not required to use the image cards, and image cards have number stamps on the back to correspond with test items. On rare occasion, test items do not have an accompanying image card due to the nature of the stimulus. The large print student test booklets will be shipped as a kit that includes a large print student book, a teacher book, and image cards. The image cards will not be done in large print. They are only regular size, and large print materials are based on the counts collected. The materials to be returned, you are to return used and unused materials to the assessment warehouse, which include your test administrator manuals, the student booklets, including large print, image cards, scoring documents, and any photocopies of materials of any other reproduction of secure materials. Debbie, do you have anything else to say?
Yeah, we're going to stretch our brain here instead of getting up and stretching our bodies. So I want you to think for a second about everything you learned in Staar a few minutes ago, and then I want you to turn that off, and I want you to think that Staar Alt is completely different. So let that go for a second and focus on Staar Alt, because Staar Alt is a very different test. So Staar Alt 2 has a preview window. You know that with Staar, we never let anybody look at the test ahead of time, right? But for Staar Alt 2, we do, in fact, not just let them, but force them to, sort of force, or at least highly encourage them to. So test administrators who have been trained on security and confidentiality and have signed an oath can preview the Staar Alt 2 materials March 15th through the 26th. They can check them out daily. They don't have to bring them back every hour when they're not going to use them, but they have to bring them back at the end of the day. And any part of the day that they're not using them, they're going to lock them up in their room. Any photocopied pages that they make or image cards that they use or write on have to be turned in and out every day too. So you're going to list all of those on the materials control form so that you make sure you get those back every day. You're going to, during the preview window, the test administrator is going to use this time to preview the presentation instructions. They're very different. It's not like you just hand them a test and read them the directions. They actually have to interact with the student, and they ask the student to read the questions and ask the student the questions. And then if the student answers in this way, then they do this. And if they answer in this way, they do something else. So it's very, very different. And it requires a lot of prior knowledge before giving the test. You just can't go in there cold on test day and give the test. So they're going to look at the presentation instructions. They're going to look at the scoring sections of the manual and become familiar with all of that. And then they're going to practice reading the scripts and following the instructions. They're also going to make any accommodations that need to be made, so that when they start giving the test, they won't have to stop and make an accommodation. So some of their accommodations may be that the student needs to have some type of tactile material that they touch for a question. So they're going to make all of those things ahead of time during this preview window. And once they've looked at the test, they can't say, oh no, I didn't teach this, and go back and teach it, because that's a serious irregularity. If they have to translate into a different language, then they're going to mark that in the test detail field. It defaults to no, so if they don't have to translate, then they don't need to mark anything. If they need to photocopy anything to make it larger or to change it in some way, cut it up, whatever they need to do, then they can't tear apart the booklet to do that. They have to keep it intact. And they need to make sure they maintain security and confidentiality when photocopying that student book. So if they make a mistake and it doesn't copy right, they can't just throw that copy away. That copy needs to be turned into you as well. And we suggest that you have 2 people together making those copies. And whoever's making them needs to be trained and have signed an oath and all of that. If they're making copies of the math, they need to make sure that they have the copier set to 100% so that there's not any change in the scaling of pictures. And we already said that every page that's made, copied, needs to be turned into you. All right, Staar Alt 2 is an untimed test, and it doesn't have to be given in one session. Also very different from Staar, right? Because on Staar, we have specific times that they're allowed to test. With Staar Alt 2, this is a different group of kids, and it's not timed, and it's one-on-one. So the test administrator might give portions of the test over several days, and they might allow breaks as necessary, or they might give several portions at different times within the same day. But whenever possible, they need to keep a cluster intact. TA does not want them to stop during the middle of a cluster. Now, a few years ago, they said they absolutely couldn't, and if they did, then they couldn't go back and finish the cluster. Well, they eased up a little bit on that, and now if they do have to stop in the middle of a cluster, let's say the kid has a break, a mental breakdown or something, they just can't go on, they're upset or whatever, they can stop in the middle of a cluster, and they don't have to not answer the rest of the cluster. But you should try as best as possible to keep the cluster together. The test items have to be administered in the order in which they appear. And we already said that we're going to try to finish a cluster before we stop. And at no time can they go back to a previously answered question. So once a student is answered, it's done. This is the breakdown of the test. Each test has 6 clusters, and each cluster has 4 questions, and those are over a certain essence statement. So altogether, there's 24 questions on the test. Except there's some field test questions this year, but we'll talk about that in a minute. The bolded text in the presentation instructions can be written just as they are presented. They can be signed, they can be translated into another language. They can be provided in written form if the student does better with reading than they do with listening. They can be paired with tactile or picture symbols. They can be shortened or simplified, but the questions cannot be changed. They can't be paraphrased, simplified, or shortened. They have to be presented exactly as they're written. The test is administered in a one-to-one setting. We tried to conduct the test in the best possible conditions with the least amount of distractions. So Staar Alt 2, since it is one-on-one, there might be other students in that class that are not testing at that time. They probably need to go somewhere else because they can't hear the test while it's being given because they're going to take the test later, and you wouldn't want them to distract the person who is testing. And just like Staar, you wouldn't want any element of the testing room to hinder the student's performance. We're going to use a testing do not disturb sign, and we're going to cover any bulletin boards that are a direct source of answers, but you don't have to cover clocks. Clear off the desk if you have extra materials. And we already said that we're going to have the students who are not testing go somewhere else or at least be in a different portion of the room. Now, we talked about field test questions for a second there. Due to the inability to field test questions in 2020, there are 4 additional field test questions on the 2021 assessment. So for all grades except for 4 and 7 writing, there are going to be 28 questions versus 24 questions. So the scoring document has 28 on it, but for 4 and 7 writing, they're only going to have 24 questions, so they can go ahead and mark out the last 4 questions they won't be used. The materials control form, you're going to use 1 form for each teacher. That same form is going to be used through the preview window and through the administration window. Materials are checked in and out every day. We've already said this, they're allowed to keep them all day. All materials, included photocopies, need to be come in and out every day. These are some ideas of things you want to list on the materials control form, the booklets, the test administrator manual, because that's secure as well, because it has the actual questions in it, the image cards, the scoring documents, accommodations, and photocopies. List all that so you make sure you're getting in and out every day. Allowable accommodations, only the ones that are routinely used can be used on the test. They should be prepared ahead of time and determined ahead of time. On the scoring document, there's a list, and the test administrator is going to mark which ones were used on there because it's going to be transcribed into the online system. The test administrator may use different accommodations on different questions or on different subjects, but the student shouldn't be seeing an accommodation for the first time. It is appropriate for the test administrator to add language that encourages the students to stay on task, but they can't add language that changes the content of a question. There is a chart with all the allowable accommodations in the manual, and as I said, on the scoring guide as well. And the accommodation information is going to be entered when you enter the answers, or you can enter it ahead of time if you prefer to do that. Assistive technology, if it's listed in the student's IEP and routinely used, can be used on the test as well. It's primarily used for communicating answers or presenting answer choices. Because the assessment is secure, some devices are not going to be allowed to be used, so any computers or tablets that can't be turned off of the internet, they can't be used. Anything that if you enter an answer into it, it can't be deleted, then it can't be used. During Staar Alt, each question is presented and in a certain way as outlined in the instructions, and then the students answer the question, and then the test administrator uses that instruction to decide where they go on from there. And that is standardized, and so they need to follow those directions, but those instructions are going to give them the way to go after the student answers. So based on whether they answered it correctly or incorrectly, they'll go in different paths. It's kind of like a choose your own adventure story. There's a scoring document that's provided to record the student's answers on and the accommodations, and that's going to be later transcribed into the system with the A, B, and C. Once the assessment is complete and recorded, the test administrator can enter that into the online system, or you can enter it into the online system, whichever you prefer. But that scoring document needs to come back to you, and you're going to turn it in with your booklets to the warehouse. So these are the things that need to be turned back into you: the scoring document, the test booklets, the manuals, the image cards, photocopies, and accommodations. We've already said this, but we're going to enter all of this information into the TAM system once they're finished. It's not necessary for you to enter a score code, because once you're finished entering that information, it's going to automatically submit. You want to make every effort to complete the test during the assessment window, but if there's some reason that the test cannot be completed within the assessment window, then you will enter the appropriate score code for why that was. The online system looks like this. Y'all should be pretty familiar with it now because you've been doing TELPAS. So we go to the exact same place for Staar Alt 2 as we have for TELPAS. These are the directions for how to enter the student responses. Very simple. Good news is Staar Alt 2, you don't have to make sessions like you do for TELPAS. The one thing for Staar Alt 2, though, is you have to have the correct form number when you enter in the online system. And this is probably one of the #1 mistakes. This and leaving the materials unattended are probably the two incidents we get for Staar Alt 2. So make sure you know what form number is used so that you enter the correct form number here, or it's an incident because you have to take it out and start over. If you want the test administrator to enter that information, you're going to give them the transcribe assistant user role, or you can enter it, whichever you want. You're going to use the same manual that you're using for TELPAS that we made and sent you a copy. The do not score codes, sorry. A for absent if they're absent from the whole window, M for medical exception, N for NAR, or O for other. So to be absent, they have to be absent for the whole window. The medical exception or no authentic academic response or NAR, the ARG committee is going to have to complete a form for that. So when you come to check in, you're going to have a Staar Alt 2 form for every student. And then for any student that has a medical exception or a NAR, they're also going to have that form. So one of the things that people get confused about is, okay, I've got these kids, but they're NAR, so I don't need to worry about entering anything into the online system because they didn't actually test, right? Wrong. Even though they're NAR, we have to enter that score code into the online system. So we have to make sure those students are in the online system to be able to enter that score code. So for every student, you're going to have a form, and for every student, you're either going to enter testing information or you're going to enter a do not score code. And there are very few others, but there might be some irregularities and a reason to mark other. We have a lot of others in STAR and not a lot of others in Staar Alt 2. The check-in is going to be April 30th through May 4th. This is usually a really easy check-in, and people seem to like it a lot better than most of the other check-ins. This right here is what you're going to bring to the warehouse. So all your test booklets, your image cards, your photocopies, your scoring documents, your manuals, all that goes in your boxes and gets taken to the warehouse. And then all of your paperwork comes here, and that's what we use for check-in. Here's all of our phone numbers again. And here is our training feedback form. Would you like to answer questions?
Yes, sure. If we have any to answer.
We have two. I think we've answered this one. Is the CTE code omitted for middle school from the master roster?
Yes, it's omitted for everyone.
And then there was one, if we need to sign in again, the answer is no. That was it for Staar Alt questions.
Okay, looks like one's popping up there.
Oh, if the Staar Alt training is generally done separately.
Yes, you would do your Staar Alt separately to just your Alt teachers. The regular masses don't necessarily need to hear it.
So I did put the feedback link in the chat for you. And if you could leave us all your wonderful feedback. I think Ken said that he was going to give us a raise based on the feedback. That's what I heard. Or maybe it was a trip to Cancun. I'm not sure.
Why does everybody want to go to Cancun all of a sudden?
I don't know.
All right. Once you have filled out your feedback form, I think we are finished for the day. Correct, Debbie?
We are.
Okay. Thank you so much. We're finished ahead of schedule. So that